annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Oh, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Look like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Is this the last week before Halloween? Yes, this is our. So I guess this is going to be our Halloween episode.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I am Victus.
And I'm Aeon.
And I'm Paul.
And this is Beyond the Shadows podcast. We are your professional, quote-unquote, professional paranormal investigators. We got some stuff for you tonight, but first I want to go over, it's our last week before Halloween, so this is our last week where we talk about the history of Halloween. We are very ill prepared. We've had a wonderful a wonderful start of the evening. So I'm just going to rattle some factoids off from Wikipedia about Halloween, because that's what we're doing until spooky season's over with. So Halloween is thought to have influences from Christian beliefs and practices. The English word Halloween comes from All Hallows Eve, being the evening before the Christian holy days of All Hallows Day, All Saints Day on November 1st, and All Souls Day on November 2nd. Heavy Christian influences. I did not realize. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III founded an oratory in St. Peter's for the relic of the holy apostles of all saints, martyrs, and confessors. Some say it was dedicated on November 1st. Wow, this has nothing to do with Halloween. Why am I reading it? By the end of the 12th century, the celebration had become known as the Holy Days of Obligation in Western Christianity and involved such tradition as ringing church bells for souls in purgatory. Well, that's something I didn't know. It also has a customary for criers dressed in black to parade the streets, ringing bells of mournful sounds and calling on all good Christians to remember the poor souls. Could you imagine that? 12th century, a bunch of dudes walking through the streets in black robes, ringing bells.
Is that where the image of death comes from? In the black robes?
Probably not.
No? Okay. I mean, I know he's like the reaper of souls, right? He's got the
Right, yeah, I actually...
the scythe and everything, but...
I just saw a Reddit thread yesterday where a guy was like, why does the Grim Reaper carry a scythe when he can just touch somebody and kill him? Well, he carries a scythe because he's the Reaper of souls.
Right.
The Reaper.
Right. The harvest. Yeah,
yeah.
The Reaper. Well, I mean, so I'm not surprised that what you pulled up comes up as heavily Christian influence, because
oh yeah,
part of how Catholicism spread, and Paul can jump in any time to correct me on any of this, but it was taking holidays from other traditions, other local religions, and incorporating them into their own, and therefore being like, see, you're already celebrating the thing that we're celebrating. You may as well just be Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm simplifying.
That's
but
what
is that pretty accurate, Paul?
The church for a long time, like forever, would try to incorporate local celebrations in, but I think it's probably the other way around. I think that this was a Christian holiday, and I think something was abutting up against the Christian holiday, or others were celebrating. I think initially it wouldn't shock me that, the people walking around in the black robes were the first Halloween costumes, the first costumes people wore from All Hallows Eve, right?
Okay.
And that just means the eve of it. And in the Christian world, the Catholic world, if you go to, let's say you go to Mass on Saturday night, Sunday is a holy day of obligation, but the Saturday night Mass counts for your Sunday obligation. The eve of the holiday counts for the celebration. If you go to, like, that's why people go to midnight Mass on Christmas, for example.
Right.
Or the Christmas Eve Mass.
Okay.
So I think this was a Christian holiday that's kind of gotten, especially in America, super commercialized.
Yeah, I call it Americanizing.
Right, because who doesn't want to make a lot of money selling Halloween costumes?
Right.
I mean, good.
So is that how witches and warlocks got worked into All Hallows Eve? Because it was about
Prob-
souls?
No,
But why
I
all
think,
the-
I think just people started trying to work the supernatural into all kinds of stuff.
Well, yeah, because like early in the forming of the country, there was that huge spiritual movement. Everybody wanted everything to do with spooky and ghosts and spirits, and it was around the
there's a lot.
20s that the Halloween holiday really came to being. Because like up before that, it really wasn't a costume holiday like it is today.
Right. But they carved pumpkins and things like that going even further back.
Right? Yeah, we talked about that a couple weeks ago. The turnip lantern.
That's right. The turnip lantern. Yeah, the turn up a lantern. Yeah. Turn up. Yeah, they were in the Norse version of the holiday, they carve turnips instead of pumpkins.
Yeah.
And there's even right? Right. I was like, who would turnip?
Like they're
Who would've
small,
been like
right?
turnip?
They're like this big.
Yeah, right. And they put
Generous.
candles in them and use them as a lantern. And
Wow, that's weird.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so
That was a tiny candle.
So
Right.
It goes back to a guy who tricked the devil into collecting his soul like 4 or 5 times, and his name was Jack. And when he finally died, instead of the devil collecting his soul, the devil condemned him to purgatory to roam Earth. And every Halloween he would manifest himself as a jack-o'-lantern, and that's why they call them jack-o'-lanterns.
yeah, it was the devil gave him a carved turnip to light his way,
Yes.
wandering the earth. Weird, right?
I've never even heard that. which is
Really?
shocking. Right.
That's why they call it a jack-o'-lantern, not like a David o'-lantern or something.
A bob a lantern.
Jonathan o'-lantern.
Well, so it's funny because Rich plays a game that's all about Norse mythology, and on Halloween they have a special item that you can get that's a turnip lantern also.
Yep.
As part of it.
Whoever that guy is. Anyway,
Oh, damn.
it's fine. I'll bleep it.
Okay.
It's good. So, this week we are talking about the crown jewel of alien abduction. I know we just covered an alien abduction case a couple weeks ago, but we have a professional in the studio this evening that's going to shed some serious light on this entire situation. So tonight we are talking about Betty and Barney Hill. This is the first recorded incident of alien abduction, and the reason it was taken so seriously at the time was because they did regression hypnosis. And I'm going to give it, I want to say a trigger warning for anybody listening. Well, if you're watching, it's going to be the same. We don't have video, but we have audio of the original regression hypnosis therapy sessions, and they are intense. So if you do not like people being severely emotionally reacting to something that they had trauma to, do not listen to this episode, because it is going to be full of it. We have 2 very long audio clips that if you're somebody easily triggered, this is probably going to trigger you. And I'm sorry. I know we don't have a lot of returning listeners, but the audio for these regression hypnosis sessions are intense. These people did go through something traumatic, I do believe. And, I think Paul can tell us a little more about it, but when you do the regression hypnosis, the emotions seem more pure. They're unfiltered. So these sessions are really, really intense. And there's going to be some language. There's going to be, no, I don't think there's language. But I cannot stress how strong these emotional reactions are in these hypnosis sessions. So be prepared. Trigger warning.
Yep.
If you're not comfortable with it, maybe this isn't the episode for you, but I feel like this is the nice cherry on top for the spooky season. Something to make you lose a little bit of sleep tonight. So you
You want
have
to tell us,
you have been warned.
you want to tell us a little bit about your experience with past life regression, Paul?
So I've heard these recordings before, and it's clear in the recording it's these people are appear to be reliving something or in some way processing a lot of trauma, and it sounds pretty rough in some of it.
Yeah.
And they appear to be very frightened. It sounds like they're very frightened, so that's going to trouble you. This is probably not the thing.
I meant your experience in general with past life regression.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
So, what do you say? How I started doing it, or what?
So
Anything you might want to share.
so Paul is our in resident. What is it that you do exactly? Tell us exactly what it is that you do with the hypnosis.
So, I started in seminary learning. I learned to do guided meditation
Mm-hmm.
to help people with grief, and you would regress them to a time their loved one was alive, and they could see their loved one in this guided meditation and talk to them, and it was, some people found it very transformational. So in the last few years, when I did it, I did what I've always done, and suddenly I found that they were, during the regression, they were in some place in some time that was not now.
Right.
They were, in the caveman days.
So thousands of years
Some-
ago,
Well, maybe, or
hundreds.
in some covered wagon, or
Okay.
some other place that was hard to understand. It just was not here and now. So I thought, I just don't really know what I'm doing. So I went to a program that was started by Dolores Cannon, who's now passed away, and she taught other people how to do this regression. She was doing quite a lot of regression, and she taught others to do regression. So I went to her level 1 and level 2 quantum healing hypnosis technique. And the idea in that technique is you hypnotize someone and you can regress them to a so-called past life.
Right.
And I say that because I don't know what it really is. I can probably tell a lot of stories about it, but all I know is pretty much everyone can be hypnotized, whether they think they can or not. And almost everyone's mind goes there. And by almost everyone's mind, I mean everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You go to some other place, and where that comes from and what it is, I don't know. Mostly it's things, and you can never really substantiate it. You don't get enough information, or it was so long ago, or the truth is everyone can't be Cleopatra in a past life.
Right? Yeah. That was the
So-
famous one. That was the famous one.
Right. I was Cleopatra in my past life. Everyone's like, so
You and
crazy,
you
so
and
like-
10 other dudes.
Yeah, right. Each other dude. So,
You and 10 other dudes that like to wear eyeshadow.
that's
Quit
exactly
channeling your
right.
inner desire and just be who you want to be, dude.
Yeah,
just put the
just live your
eyeshadow
life.
on. You don't have to say all that. So I just didn't. I don't know if it's real, but think about that. You most people, if it is real and you really are going to some past life, the idea is that, or the fact of humanity is, most of us, if we lived past lives, we were pretty much poor dirt farmers.
Right.
And there's, everyone couldn't be the king or the queen or whatever all the time. So you're gonna, 20, 30 years after you died, 400 years ago, no one's gonna know who you were.
Right.
No records.
It's gonna be no record, or very little record. And especially when you get closer to 1,000 years ago, there's just nothing.
Of
Unless you were
anybody.
some kind of royalty or something.
Right.
There's just nothing. So what I learned in the Dolores Cannon program, the quantum healing hypnosis technique, is I think Dolores Cannon was doing this, and she weirdly began investigating UFO abduction, supposedly UAP abduction,
Yeah.
because I don't remember how she started it, but it became kind of a big thing. And in fact, they began hosting the UFO conference in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, quite a number of years ago, and now it's an annual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she started that.
Yeah, I think she started.
cool.
It was really, yeah, she was really instrumental in it. So I've heard about this couple we're going to talk about today. I've heard probably all of these recordings of the hypnosis, and I've heard about others, and I've had some experience with others. And sometimes when you regress people, assuming that's true, and let's just for the sake of this discussion say, yes, there's past lives and you can regress to them. They regress to this, and sometimes they regress to a very difficult moment in that life, and
Right.
it's not an uncommon situation that they'll regress to a day of a lot of pain.
Right.
And sometimes it's a little scary. You'll be all nice going along and regressing them, and say you use the thing I call the cloud method. They're floating along the cloud, just back and back and back, and finally they're there.
Yeah.
And they're drifting off the cloud to the place that they're that's been chosen for them, that their subconscious wants them to see. And they float down to the ground, and suddenly they're screaming.
Oh, jeez.
And you've just had a very calm thing, and as the hypnotist, you're really pretty calm yourself and speaking calm, and you're moderating your voice and doing all this thing, and suddenly here's this person in front of you in some sort of a trance screaming.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's a little bit frightening. Sometimes the things you hear are a little bit frightening. And so I suppose that's the point of what I was saying and talking about how difficult sometimes it is when you regress people. The fact is, if there are past lives, we've all died. And death is usually not very clean and not very comfortable.
Right.
And so one of the things about the quantum healing hypnosis technique is they'll regress you to a past life and take you through the death of that life. And you do 2 or 3 of them per session usually.
Okay. I want to say, for the spirit of conversation, that I subscribe to a really strange school of thought. It's called egg
There's a
theory.
shocker.
Yeah, right? I do something strange. Weird, right?
Weird, right?
So I subscribe to the school of thought of egg theory. And for those of you that don't want to listen to my long drawn out idea of what this is, I'm not plugging this dude. He's not a sponsor or anything, but the rapper Logic, I forget which album it is, but there's a song on one of his albums called Waypoint, where a guy dies and he meets God, and in the audio track, God is Neil deGrasse Tyson, which is great because I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Neil deGrasse Tyson explains to him that everybody on Earth is him, that when you die, you become reborn. And I follow the school of thought, reincarnation. I believe in this. It's been ingrained in me for years and years, and it's just wholeheartedly what I believe. There's nothing's going to change my mind. But everybody on Earth has been me at some point in ever. I have been both of you. I will be both of you. I'll be everybody listening. Let's say I get gunned down tomorrow. I'm the person that dies and the person that kills me at some point in time or another. I become reincarnated in every person so I can become a more enlightened person. And
So as though reincarnation is non-linear.
yeah, it's, I might reincarnate next time as a woman in medieval times, or I might reincarnate in 50 years as a Martin Luther King Jr. Who knows? That's what I believe. So I love past life progression because I feel like it's hints of who we were before, and it threads into what I believe when it comes to egg theory. So yeah, go check out that Logic track. Also, just listen to Logic. Dude's great.
He gets referenced a lot.
He does. I really like Logic. I listen to Logic a lot. He's from he's from just north of me, like 2 hours away from me. But yeah, So this is why Paul and I get along, because I believe in this reincarnation thing so much, and he's so into this past life regression that we are very close to the same level. But I'm very happy to have this episode tonight.
It's funny because I didn't think about if I believed in it or not. I just didn't. I didn't think much about it. In my church training, we don't. It's just not discussed. It's not a doctrine that's taught in the Christian church generally.
Right.
So I just had. It didn't bother me. I didn't have to pretend not to believe in it or anything. I didn't think about it one way or another. But boy, this experience I've had with it, I still, that's why I say, gee, I don't know if it's real or not. Because what I do today, I'm a lawyer and I really like evidence. And I just don't have a lot of evidence about it, except I have a lot of anecdotal stories about all these people and all these supposed past lives. That's why I just say, listen, I know everyone's mind goes there and I know everyone can be hypnotized, whether they think they can or not.
There's a piece of me that wants to be hypnotized, but I've dealt with so much stuff in my life that I'm afraid I'm going to go straight back to the really traumatic stuff. And honestly, I've learned to deal with all that stuff and I don't want to bring it back up. So...
the funny thing is I had a bunch of regression hypnosis as part of the training for this quantum healing hypnosis technique. And I was regressed to a bunch of different past lives. And I was never in any of those past lives that I recall anything about bitten by a snake. But now I've always been afraid of snakes, like an unreasonable fear of snakes.
Mm-hmm.
And after a series of regressions that I had that I didn't deal with snakes at all, it never came up. I'm just suddenly no longer afraid of them. Like I'd rather not be bitten by one because
right.
It's not be comfortable. But it's crazy. I'm not afraid of them anymore, and I have no idea why. That's the only thing I can tell you that regression really did for me.
Huh. That's weird. So
I thought it was weird too.
Yeah, usually you would think like the connecting thread would be maybe you were Cleopatra and you died from a snake.
All those others are.
If anyone was,
we got the real deal.
I was the real deal.
I was Napoleon twice, so
All right, well, like I said, we're getting the Betty and Barney Hill tonight. We're gonna start at the top of this. So these recordings that I got are kind of long. I would like to go through all of it. If we don't get through all of it, it's okay. Maybe we'll do like part 1 today if it stretches out a little far and pick back up later in the season. But I will say, didn't we agree that towards the end of the year we were going to start season 2?
Yeah, we can. If this goes 2 episodes, then we'll make that second episode the end. If not, then this will be the end of this season, and we'll start.
Yeah, we'll
start with the next season.
So December, the end of December, we'll be doing season. January comes around, we'll do season 2. Will be the start. We started in the middle of the year, so we're doing pretty good. Are y'all ready to get into this? You ready to?
I'm ready. I have not heard any of these. The two of you have both heard.
Do you know the story?
I know some of the story. Yeah, I know it only because I've watched enough UFO documentaries that when they start talking timeline, while it's not, it's the first modern documentation of UFO abduction. You can find historical stuff that sounds a lot like it was probably UFO abduction, right? But it's the first modern era of Western history or Western civilization abduction that anybody made a lot of documentation about.
Yeah.
So it comes up a lot,
right?
Especially since it's around the same time that it's post-nuclear weapons. It's it's all that stuff. It's the beginning of the sort of infinite branching of experiences after. This is the sort of the start point.
This is the crux of alien abduction. This was the first
heavily
reported case. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this picture. I have a picture of Betty and Barney Hill. This is a wonderful, colorful, or color. The original photograph was black and white, but this is colorized.
Gotcha.
I'm going to point out the elephant in the room. That this was in the 1960s, and this is a biracial couple.
And there were no elephants.
And there were
so
no,
it's a big deal.
and there were no elephants. Yes, they are a biracial couple. It's hard to tell in Barney Hill's audio that he is African American. It really is a moot point, but a lot of the contention with this story was like, oh, they're a biracial couple, or so what they're saying can't be true anyway. I think after discussing this case, we're going to realize that race has absolutely nothing to do with this. These two people just came across something totally unique, and they were the first to deal with this. So,
I think the issue of the race here was an issue in that it colored how their story was taken seriously.
right,
Mm-hmm.
If it had been me, at my age in the 60s, the age I am now in the 60s, married to some, nice and acceptable woman that was also white, and we went and told this story, it probably would have had much, much more traction.
right.
If we'd told this story in the way that they did, we would have had much, much more traction.
And I'll admit, maybe a year and a half ago, I had never heard of Betty and Barney Hill. And one of my favorite podcasts, This Paranormal Life, shout out, guys. Hey, y'all are awesome. It was their episode on these two that got me interested in this, and I went down the rabbit hole. Because if you start Googling this stuff, this rabbit hole goes for days and days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the case of Betty and Barney Hill, often referred to as the first widely publicized and thoroughly investigated alien abduction claim in the United States, has fascinated UFO researchers and skeptics in the general public since it first came to light in the early 1960s. Betty and Barney Hill, they're based on their own testimony, supporting investigations and subsequent cultural impact on their story. So we're going to start with the incident. This started in September 19th through the 20th in 1961. Betty and Barney Hill were a married couple living in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And Betty was a social worker. Barney worked for the U.S. Postal Service. Both were active in the civil rights movement, with Barney serving on the local board of the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights. They were an interracial couple, uncommon at the time, but were well respected in their community. And on the night of September 19th, 1961, after taking a spontaneous trip to Niagara Falls in Montreal, the Hills were driving back home to New Hampshire along U.S. Route 3, and it was late in the night, around 10:30 p.m., when the couple first noticed something unusual in the sky. While driving through the rural area near Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty spotted what she initially thought was a bright star or planet moving erratically in the sky. She pointed out to Barney, who was initially skeptical, suggesting that it was likely just an airplane or a satellite. However, as the light grew closer and brighter and seemed to be following their car, the couple became more intrigued and concerned. Betty, with an interest in astronomy, thought it might be a UFO, while Barney remained unconvinced but curious. So the point about her being interested in astronomy is going to play a major, major role later.
Yeah.
The couple pulled over at a rest stop to get a better look through the binoculars. Betty observed what appeared to be a spinning craft-like object with multicolored lights, moving in a manner that defied known aircraft capabilities. Barney, still skeptical, took the binoculars and saw what he later described as a pancake-shaped craft with rows of windows, through which he could see several humanoid figures. He claimed that the beings were observing them. This sight, coupled with the craft's eerie silence and its increasingly close proximity, frightened Barney, and he quickly urged Betty to get back in the car, so they drove away. This is where things start to get super interesting. As the Hills continues driving, they realized that the object was now directly overhead, blocking their path on the road. Barney stopped the car, grabbed a handgun he had brought with him, and stepped out to confront the craft. But when he approached the object, he was overcome with a feeling of paralysis and fear. Barney would later recall seeing a ramp descending from the craft and several beings moving towards him when he lost awareness of the situation. So, we did dip a little bit into some details here, but for the sake of the story, in a linear sense, how it happened was they were seeing this light, and the last thing that they remembered was the craft being above them.
Right.
Okay.
And then the next thing they knew, how many hours later was it?
Yes. Let's see. In a panic, the Hills drove away at a high speed, but shortly thereafter began experiencing strange sensations and auditory phenomena, such as a series of buzzing and beeping sounds that seemed to come from the car's trunk. At some point, they entered what felt like an altered state of consciousness. They remembered a vague roadblock and encountering what they later believed to be alien beings, but had no clear memory. The Hills finally arrived at home around dawn. Several hours later than they expected for a trip of that length. They couldn't account for approximately 2 hours of the drive. And both of them felt inexplicably disoriented and distressed. Betty noticed that her dress was torn, and Barney found scuff marks on his shoes. They also found a puzzling pattern of shiny spots in the car's trunk, which caused a compass to behave erratically when brought near it. The couple was disturbed by these details, but initially didn't know what to make of the experience. So they left Niagara Falls at 10:30.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't have it in my research here, but I have researched it before. They took like a weird back road. It was a dirt road at the time. Now it's not a dirt road, but the way it was described in the research that I read was they were driving along. They saw the light through the trees and eventually came over the top of them. And they tried to get away. And some point in time when they were getting away is when the lost time comes in. So they lose like the time of the drive was supposed to have been like 5 hours, and it took from 10:30 till dawn. So they somewhere in there they lost like 4 or 5 hours. So they get home and it's dawn, and they're like, well, that should have only been, I think the way the research said it was like they were supposed to have arrived home around like 2:30 or 3:30 in the morning. But when they got home, it was dawn. So we're looking at like 6:30, 7:30,
Gotcha.
7 o'clock. I don't know. That's a little farther north than I'm used to, so I'm not exactly sure what time sunrise is up there. But they lost a bunch of time and they couldn't figure out how. So to touch on Betty, not in a weird way. I don't want to touch on Betty. It's not my type. She said her dress was torn. So it was weird because she had tears on it, and I think somebody had mentioned that her dress was new. So
yeah,
it looked like somebody had pulled at her dress, and I don't know if you've ever tried to pull apart a dress that's new or any kind of stitching that's new. It's not easy.
Right.
It's not easy to do. But Barney, his clothing wasn't ripped, but his shoes were scuffed in just the right way that it looked like he was being drugged. Like somebody had him underneath the arms and was dragging him backward. Like he was unconscious.
So scuffed in the back of the heels.
Yeah, in a weird way. Like you could tell, like like what kind of wear and tear you get on your shoes normally, right?
Right.
It was like exaggerated drag marks on his shoes. And the only thing he could figure was he was drugged somewhere that he couldn't remember. And there was some weird detail about the spots on the car.
He said that they were able to hold when a compass was held near it, it made the compass turn towards the spots.
Yeah, the compass would be affected by the weird spots on the car. So I've heard people talk about it being like radiation affecting the paint on the car, but in order for like radiation to really affect paint, I feel like it has to be like a high temperature as well. Like I don't think radiation directly affects paint, right? It's just it's just radiation. It's not heat.
Right. Well, I mean, it would depend on what the paint's made out of, but yeah, generally, if you had enough radiation to affect paint, they'd be dead.
Yeah.
Like if we're talking nuclear radiation,
Right.
that if you have enough to discolor paint or modify materials other than to just make them radioactive, like do actual physical damage to the material, biological stuff certainly would have long already been, killed off or affected.
It's good that you say that because that comes into play later. So, the aftermath and recollections. In the following days of the incident, Betty began having vivid dreams and reoccurring nightmares. These dreams were filled with disturbing imagery of being taken aboard a strange craft and undergoing medical examinations by non-human entities. In these dreams, Betty described the beings as humanoid but with large bald heads, slanted eyes, and gray skin. So, I'm going to pause.
Greys.
It's the Greys, right? So,
The Greys.
So Betty and Barney Hill, this is where we get the original depiction of the alien Greys from. This is the first recorded instance. Because canonically speaking, from this point forward, when they talk about aliens, they're not green anymore. They're gray with big eyes.
No, they're the Greys with big heads and big eyes.
Yes.
Yeah, disproportionate head to body thing going on.
And it's because of them. They are the trendsetters. She recalled in her dream being separated from Barney and subjected to physical examinations involving needles and other instruments. So this research here is a little vague, but I will say that she recalled having a long needle inserted through her navel, and she recalled how it was so painful, and they said that they were checking her for pregnancy. So
that's what the beings told her.
that's what they told her, yes, because she was panicking.
Yeah.
All right. These dreams would persist for 4 or 5 consecutive nights, deeply unsettling Betty. Although Barney did not have similar dreams, he remained anxious and suffered from emotional distress following the encounter. Betty eventually confided in her sister about their experience, and she urged the Hills to report the incident to the local UFO organization, which led them to contact NICAP, the National Investigation Committee for Aerial Phenomenon. NICAP is the... I don't think that NICAP is active anymore. I think it's MUFON now.
Yeah.
The Mutual UFO Network. But back in the day, so NICAP was what came after the Project Blue Book.
Okay, gotcha.
NICAP was ran by civilians, whereas Project Blue Book was government. Military, yeah. NICAP investigators, including a former Air Force officer, interviewed the Hills and were struck by the consistency of their accounts. The Hill stories were beginning to attract attention, but they were still left with the mystery of the missing time and their fragmented memories of the nights. Now we're getting to the hypnosis part. It seemed, some of the details were left out of this, but I will say it's kind of a personal detail for Barney, but after this event, Barney was seeing it's not like genital warts, but it's close to it. But there was like bumps and like skin rash irritation around his genital area after this encounter. Which makes me think about what you said with radiation.
Right.
that
I mean, it causes blistering of the skin. I mean, it's usually more severe than just skin taggy sort of bumps or alligatoring. It's more like, like, I mean, it looks like burns until it starts to behave differently than a burn.
right. I think
As far as won't heal, sloughs off, that kind of thing.
it wasn't like an intense radiation burn. I feel like it was like radiation irritation. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Did they say that it reddened or the skin turned
Yes.
dead afterwards?
Yeah, it started red and then it turned bumpy. I think he was looked at by a doctor, but he's just like, this is just some form of an STD or whatever.
Because they wouldn't have had a lot in the way of testing then.
Right. So, the hypnosis. As the psychological toll of the experience took its toll on Barney, he began suffering from ulcers and high blood pressure. The Hills sought professional help, and they were referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon, a well-regarded psychiatrist and neurologist who specialized in hypnosis. Dr. Simon began working with the couple in early 1964 using regression hypnosis to help them uncover their lost memories of the abduction. Under hypnosis, both Betty and Barney recounted being taken aboard a small craft by gray-skinned beings with large heads and large eyes, and they were subject to medical examinations in separate rooms. Barney in particular recalled the alien examining his genitals with a cup-like device and extracting samples. Take that for what you think.
Extracting samples.
Yeah, they sucked the life out of him.
Gotcha.
He also remembered being unable to resist their commands and feeling extreme fear through the entire encounter. Betty's hypnosis sessions provided more detailed descriptions of the beings and the craft's interior. She claimed that one of the beings, whom she called the leader, showed her a star map that depicted trade routes between different star systems. Later, when she was asked to draw the star map from memory, it became one of the most famous pieces of evidence in the case. In the 1970s, an amateur astronomer named Marjorie Fish claimed that Betty's map matched the Zeta Reticuli star system, a pair of stars about 39 light years from Earth. This led to the popularization of the theory that the Hills were abducted by extraterrestrial. Hold on, let me get a little more of this. The theory that the Hills were abducted by extraterrestrials from this distant system, often referred to as the Zeta Reticulans, or Greys. So this brings us to the hypnosis audio. So we have Betty and Barney Hill. We don't have the full audio of either one. Barney's is shorter. Betty's is about 40 minutes long. Which one do you want to hear first?
I don't care. Pick one.
I guess we'll do Barney first. I do need to confirm that y'all can even hear this audio.
Yep.
You hear the audio?
Yep.
Okay. Again, I'm going to say trigger warning. This is kind of intense. This is Barney Hill's hypnosis, one of his many hypnosis sessions. Goodness. If you want to stop, talk about something, throw your hands up, wave them, jiggle them, do a little dance, and we'll pause the audio and we'll talk about it. Here we go.
Right.
Calm now. Relax. Deeply relaxed. Deeply relaxed. You will not have to make any outcry. But you can remember it now. Keep remembering. You feel you have to get your gun. This is going to harm you, you felt. I open.
So this is the point of the incident where he was stopped by the roadblock. So something that wasn't in the research, he pulled over because it looked like a military roadblock, and that's what he remembered initially.
Okay.
So when he went home, that was the last thing he remembered was the military roadblock. And it was after he did the hypnosis stuff that he realized that it was not military, it was something else.
The trunk of my car. Did I get it? Did I get back in the car? All right, just keep reasonably calm. Then I put it in my coat. And then I get out with the binoculars. And it is there. And I look. And I look. And it shifts over. And I think, I'm not afraid. I'll shoot it down if I'm not afraid. And I walk out, and I walk across the road. And there it is up there. Oh, God damn it! Calm down. Calm down, it's there, but you can see it, but it's not going to hurt you. Go on. Why doesn't it go away? Look at it. It's right there. Calm. It's not going to hurt you. There's a man. Is he a captain? What is he? You gotta look at me. Just a minute. Let's go back a little bit now. You say it's there. Did you say it was 1,000 feet away? Oh, no. 1,000 yards? It doesn't look that far. It's very big. And it's not that far. And I can see it tilted toward me. Tilted? What does it look like now when you say tilted? Did you see wings? Looks like a big pancake with windows and rows of windows and lights of not light, just one huge light. And rows of windows like a commercial plane? Rows of windows. They're not like a commercial plane because they curve around to the size of this pancake. And I say, my God, no. I have to shake my head. I got to, it can't be true. This isn't there. Oh, it's still there. And I look up and down the road. Can somebody come and tell me this is not there? It can't be. And oh, you're still asleep, but you can see it all clearly. It's there. You sure it's there? Yeah. You weren't having a dream? It's there. You'd had no sleep that evening? I touched my right arm. It's not my right, it's my left arm. And then I touched my right arm, and it is my left arm. I'm confused. You're clear now. You're relaxed. It's still there. If I let my binoculars fall and dangle from my neck and then start over again. Maybe it won't be there, but it is. Why? What do they want? What do they want? One person looks friendly. He's friendly looking, and he's looking at me over his right shoulder, and he's smiling.
Could you see him clearly?
Yes, I thought.
What's his face like? What does it make you think of?
It's round. I think of a red-haired Irishman. I don't know why, but I think I know why. Because Irish are usually hostile to Negroes, and when I see a friendly Irish person, I react to it by thinking I will be friendly. And I think this one that is looking over his shoulder is friendly.
You say looking over his shoulder. Was he facing away from you?
Yes, he was facing a wall. And
You saw him through this window? Or you said there was a row of windows.
it was a row of windows. Just a huge row of windows, only divided by struts or structures that prevented it from being one solid window. Or then it would have been one solid window. And the evil face on he looks like a German Nazi.
From Irishman to Nazi.
Yeah.
Did he have on a uniform?
Yes,
What kind of uniform?
it was black. He had a black scarf around his neck, dangling over his left shoulder.
You pointed it out as if it were on you.
I never noticed that.
He had a black scarf on his neck. How could you see these figures so clearly at that distance?
I was looking at him with binoculars.
Oh. Did they have faces like other people? You say one reminded you of a red-headed Irishman.
His eyes were slanted. I see it so. His eyes were slanted, but not like a Chinese.
What was Betty doing all this time?
I'm not close to her. I don't know.
You're out
I
there
don't
by
even
yourself
think of
now?
her.
You don't think of her. Is she saying anything?
I can't hear her.
Did you make any outcry to her, the way you did to me?
I can't remember. I don't know. I did not.
You would remember it if you did.
I did not. But I know this creature, this leader is telling me something.
He's telling you something. How? How is he getting it to you?
I can see it in.
That's the end of that clip. Yep.
So, I have a question for Paul.
Yeah.
about this. What do you think of the style of the guy performing the hypnosis?
Well, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, I think modernly you use different calming techniques. I guess you've seen me do one or two.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that. Seems like I might have had to use some calming techniques on one of them.
Yeah, I feel like
But-
just saying you're calm, you don't have to be upset is not
Right.
super effective.
I mean, I would use a different calming technique. I would say, I would say, you're only seeing this like a movie. You don't have to experience the pain of it. Just be calm, step back, and just watch it like you're watching a movie and tell me what you're seeing. They can't hurt you now. It's over.
So I guess what I'm getting at is listening to him. I don't think he's doing it intentionally, but he corrects Barney several times about what he's saying in a way that seems
Almost like he's
not
leading
like
him.
a little bit like he's leading him, but the things that he's leading him about don't seem to color the story, but he's leading him at like, I don't know, it seems more direct than what I hear you do.
Right, because I try very hard not to implant any suggestion at all, like none at all.
Because you'll do a lot of, can you tell me more about that?
Okay, tell me what you see now.
And
Can you go to the? Did you live in a house? Can you go to that place? Go to your house now and look at it. What do you see?
and I hear a lot of that whenever you do it. And now what are you seeing?
Right now, what
And
do you see?
and when you're looking ahead, what do you see? Like it's a lot of tell me what you're seeing, tell me what you're seeing, tell me what you're seeing. This guy seems to do a lot of. It's a little more interrogative.
Right, and you know the
Which I
funny
think is
thing
weird.
about this is we're just not hearing the beginning of it. We're not
Right.
hearing the induction.
Right.
We're not hearing any of that. So
Right.
and there's obviously been some story told under hypnosis prior to this start of this clip. Because
Right.
he's like, you said you got your gun, and I hadn't heard anything about a gun yet,
Right.
and it's a little more leading than I care to do.
That's why I asked about your opinion on his style.
I
I know
think-
everybody's got a style, but
As I recall correctly, this guy doing the hypnosis is either a medical doctor, psychiatrist,
Yes.
or a PhD psychologist. I don't remember which, but he's a doctoral level therapist of some sort that has some specialization in hypnosis. He didn't fancy himself to be some sort of a UFO researcher. I don't believe. I think he was just some kind of a therapist, and they went to him to try to deal with the anxiety and the various other psychological trauma or that kind of conditions they were having, the anxiety and all of that.
Okay, do you want to just jump into the next clip?
Sure.
sure. Yeah. I guess he was pretty disjointed, but I could kind of follow what missing whatever the first half of the story was. It was pretty easy to follow what was going on, though
There's some other parts of a recording, and they're way more difficult to listen to.
Yeah.
With him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll hear Betty's clips are way more emotional, and
Yeah, and his are quite emotional too. When he's taken in there, he yells out, he cries out, he's saying, "I don't know why are they doing this," and that sort of thing. It's very rough. This is kind of was the lead up to him
yes,
being taken in.
So I guess I'm a little confused over the morphing of how he's perceiving these figures, right? So he's got, an Irishman that he thinks is friendly, but then later it's menacing, and then later it's a Nazi.
I think it was
Officer.
two separate.
Yeah, I think it was separate ones. The Irish one was nice to him,
Yes,
and the Nazi officer kind of person was not. And I don't know why he felt like, but the person looked menacing and was in some sort of a black uniform with a black scarf. And he says he was seeing that by looking through binoculars. And then he put the binoculars down, letting them dangle from his neck, hoping that when he'd look through it again, that wouldn't be there. He was just imagining something.
Yeah. So maybe it's like his unconscious was piecing together just what made sense. You know, like your brain would fill in the blanks. You know,
Our brain's really good at doing that, right? So
yeah,
it might be an entirely different thing, much like the Life of Pi story, right? It's two stories that are the same thing that are wildly different. And maybe his brain's just filling in something from a terribly traumatic event.
Yeah. Like he just sees a guy with a mean looking face and he's wearing something that looks like a uniform. It was the 60s. You know, Nazis were still fresh on the brain, you know? So
Right.
You know, when you think of a bad guy,
they're barely 15, 16 years post-war.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, this was
left a huge mark on our national psyche.
Yeah, 1961. So, yeah, 15, 16 years. Yeah, hard to I could see the brain just filling in that gap.
Right.
So, this next clip is Betty Hill. We're gonna just dive right into it. This audio is a little clearer than the other one. Let's just see what it's got for us, man.
We're driving along. I don't know where we are. I don't even know how we got here. Barney and I, we've been driving, and I don't know how long, and we haven't even been talking. I just been sitting here feeling that something's going to happen. And I'm not really too afraid. Except right now I am. At that time I didn't feel afraid.
I'm gonna say her voice matches her face perfectly, by the way. she looks like a woman with that type of accent. Oh God! Oh God! He punched me in the face bones.
Why are you crying if you're not afraid?
I'm afraid now, but I wasn't. I wasn't afraid. I was afraid when I saw the men in the road.
Men in the road?
I never been so afraid in my life.
Tell me about the men in the road. It's all right now. You're safe here. Tell me about the men in the road.
We're driving along. We're on a tarred road. And all of a sudden, without any warning or any reason or rhyme or anything, Barney made he almost, the brakes, I think he would squeal. He stopped so suddenly and made this sharp left-hand turn to the highway, and we went onto this narrow road. I was wondering what he was doing down here, but he wasn't saying anything, and I wasn't. I figured, well, maybe we're lost, but so what? We'll come out somewhere. And we're going along, and there was a sharp curve in the road, and as we went around the curve, there were trees. There were a lot of tall trees on my side. I don't know about Barney's side of the road, but there was these men standing in the highway, and I wasn't too afraid when I saw them. They were standing there, and I thought, well, you know, there was several. There was, I don't know, and they were just, you couldn't get a good look at them. But then I thought, well, you know, are they in a car and the car broken down, or what are they doing there? And Barney, of course, had to stop, and then he stops the car, and these men started to come up to the car. They separated. They came up in two groups. And when they started to do that, I get real scared. And the car motor died. The car stalled. And,
Car stalled.
Yeah.
and when they started coming up, Barney tried to start the car. He tried to start it, and you know how a motor of a car would just turn over, and won't fire? And he tried to start the car.
You did what?
He's trying to start the car and it won't start. And the men are coming towards us. And I think, well, I can get away from this. If I get the car door open, I can run in the woods and hide. And I'm thinking it, and I just put my hand on the car door and open it. And the men come up and they open it for me. And they open the car door, and there's not very big men. And there's one next to me, and then there's two men behind us.
I didn't hear that.
Two men. There's a car door, and there's 1, 2, 3 men, and then there's 1, 2 more behind them.
Yes.
And one man puts his hand out.
Go on.
I don't know what happened.
You can hear her breathing. She's
You can
breathing
remember
hard.
everything now.
Right.
Yeah.
So at this time, these are the psychiatrists here who did this hypnosis. They're probably, I think they were hypnotized 3 or 4 years after this. It was what, 64, 65?
Yeah.
And at that time, the only people doing hypnosis were, in any amount with any competence, were psychiatrists and psychologists. So he's a pretty experienced person. This isn't some parlor trick hypnotist that's going to come in there and get you to not smoke and
Right. Yeah, this
get
is...
you to say funny things or whatever that you do at parties. This is somebody who has quite a lot of experience with it, and she's clearly reliving something terribly traumatic. That's her breathing. If you were there to see her, you'd probably see sweat on her face, sweat underneath her, and on her upper lip. You'd see other signs of probably some emotional distress. And that's how it sounds, and that's what I would think when I would sit there and look at her.
Yeah. This was Benjamin Simon. It says he was a well-regarded psychiatrist and neurologist who specialized in hypnosis.
Yeah.
So, you want to give it a couple more minutes, or you want to cliffhanger this for next week?
Why don't we leave it right there, and we can pick up back on her. That way we can have plenty of time afterwards to go over the two of them together.
Yeah. And once we get...
Because there's going to be a lot to unpack after hers.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
We still got another 35 minutes of her interview here. And if it goes in the direction I think it's going, it gets really, really intense. We're still at the point where she hasn't even left the car.
Right.
And, it's crazy to see this type of emotional response just having somebody walk up to the car.
Well, I think the other thing that's worth mentioning about both their experiences and how they start, for instance, Barney has a gun,
Yeah.
right? I mean, not that it would have been that unusual for people to carry handguns then, but he has a gun in the car with him on their way to a vacation,
Yeah.
and he has it in his jacket pocket, which is what he mentions. He puts it back in his pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And he sees them getting stopped by a roadblock. She sees it starting out, at least, as getting stopped by a roadblock. And they were both active in the civil rights movement. And they were taking a sort of back road. It's probably not unreasonable to guess that they got harassed.
Yeah.
Often. And that, a pretty big fear when traveling would have been to get stopped somewhere outside of their community. And, something... some harm coming to them.
Yeah, like a mob pulling up or something.
Right. Now they were traveling north instead of, further into the south, but sentiment was sentiment, in most places. And so probably at least fear in the beginning of the experience starts out just by being, just by thinking they're being stopped.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like she has such a strong emotional response to just being stopped, because that lingering thought is always in the back of the head. What if somebody wants to stop us just because we're biracial or what have you?
Right.
This was the civil rights movement. I can imagine they probably had more than a couple of run-ins with something like this. But
because they were active in the movement, so
yeah,
real harm came to a lot of people who did any amount of work in the movement. So yeah, I'm sure it was that was a real danger for them.
Yeah.
Often.
Yeah. It makes me feel like they had just heard stories. Like maybe they were fortunate enough to not ever be like just stopped by a mob of people, and this was their first reaction or first interaction with something like that.
And so they're fearing worse.
Right. And, that could account for the emotional response to begin with. But it comes out later that they get this sense of calm once they're being taken.
Mm-hmm.
But then the terror comes back later on the ship. And
gotcha.
And, that's what we're gonna touch on that next week. We're going to finish this audio clip out next week, and then we're going to break this all down, and we're going to talk about, I have a little bit more of the script left. I say a little bit more. I got a page and a half more of the script. So, I don't know.
I think we can't really talk about this without talking about race, much like we've been doing.
Right.
The 1964 Civil Rights Act wasn't even enacted until July of 1964, and that was after I did a quick Google search, and assuming, the internets are true, I think their first hypnosis session was in February of 1964.
Yeah.
So they're still 5 months from the 1964 Civil Rights Act even being passed. And there's a lot of civil unrest in this country.
Right.
And there's a lot of civil unrest over race and that sort of thing going on. So I wonder what this is. If you could, I don't think you can take out the racial tension and the racial problem and the fear they must have had. But if you took that out, I wonder what we're left with. And, their whole story, even the words they're using, is kind of colored by that lens.
Yeah.
But clearly something happened. I presume the hypnosis was a valid hypnosis by a medical doctor who knew what he was doing. And then we have this. There's a lot more details, though. Boy, she goes into a lot of details. He does too.
Yeah.
In the audio of him I've heard later on, a little later in that, they might have had several sessions. I don't recall the details, but
yeah,
there are a whole lot of details they give about being on some craft and them doing all these exams or experiments on them.
Yeah. I will. I'll skip ahead a little bit after, just to make sure this is the full scope of what we're looking for here. And if not, I'll do some more digging and see if I can't find more audio clips. but so far
So, this-
they're kind of hard to find in decent quality, and there were a couple that I passed on because they were, you couldn't hear half of what they were saying.
yeah, they're very hard to hear. I think the recording was difficult. I think the microphones were difficult.
Yeah.
But the story is remarkable.
It really
This is a remarkable story. And what happened to these people?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sometimes you'll hear these things that are just like, wow, what happened? Sometimes people will come. I get calls sometimes, but I honestly send them to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I get calls from people who see that I'm, I've been trained in the Dolores Cannon School.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, hey, I've lost 3 or 4 hours on this trip or 5 hours, or I lost a whole day and I just don't have any memory of it. And I send them to someone else. I haven't done it because I'm not sure I'm ready to hear this whole abduction story, because that's almost how they all start out, missing time.
Yeah.
And it's either that or a seizure, right? They've had some seizure.
All right. Well,
So interesting, fascinating.
so we're gonna leave it there. Did either one of you guys want to add anything before the end of spooky season?
For the end of spooky season, well, so while you see a lot of people dress up as aliens for Halloween, right? That's a pretty newer phenomenon. It used to always be witches and Jack the Pumpkin, and like when I was a kid, I was like a ninja, and I think UFOs have gotten co-opted into Halloween quite a bit.
Yeah.
More recently with how much it's in the the general meme of world consciousness, right?
Oh, the costume of the it's the inflatable costume where it looks like you're being carried away by an alien.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's a good one.
There's somebody down the street from us that has some kind of a blow up yard balloon thing, and on the top of it is this big UFO looking thing, and there's like a ray coming down, and inside of it there's like a cow on its side being lifted up.
Yeah, one of those yard inflatables.
Yeah, that's cool.
I was driving by it and I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I think it says a lot about how much, because basically the things that scare us are the things that we fear the most, that we want maybe to not be afraid of, or maybe to normalize, work their way into Halloween, right? So like, all the horror movies that scared the crap out of us, we end up wanting to be be Jason or be Freddy Krueger, right? Because it kind of takes, now it's fun, right? Now I'm Freddy Krueger, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of fun now. So same thing, I think maybe with being the UFOs and being the aliens, because the truth is, if tomorrow you had the classic movie encounter of UFO lands on the White House lawn and Greys get out and announce that they're here, right?
Yeah.
You would have the most widespread and generalized panic I think we've ever seen ever.
Absolutely.
Because it throws so many things up in the air that we, science, religion, if it bothers you that there's life on another planet and it's not just here, then religion, physics, social structure. All kinds of things come into question about that, and what we believe and what we think is real and what we think is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, for this to come on the heels of another thing that defied what we thought was possible, right? The nuclear war, right? And World War on a scale that actually started to encompass the world, right? World War I, we called it that because it was so big, but it mostly stayed localized in Europe.
Right.
Right. It didn't spread across the oceans and spread, to almost, more continents than not, like World War II did.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think you have that line drawn, or that connecting line between, Halloween and us doing some UFO stuff. But I would suggest that rather than go looking in a strange field for a cow being abducted, or rather than spend too much time late at night out in the woods where the Greys might find you to examine you, it would probably be better if you just followed us.
Beyond the shadows.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
It's alive! It's alive!
A creature like that, I would never die.
And this monster starts running right at me.
Annihilated by nuclear bombs.
Beast is not dead. I put 4 bullets into him.
Why, you're crazy.
But I saw that monster too. All I want is for someone to believe me.
Contaminated.
Face. Horrible. Look like it would scare you to death.
All right, let's get to work.
Beyond the shadows.